हम लोग जो बोलेंगे वो भी बोला जाता है। दिमाग से सुनना है, सरकारी में लोग बोल रहे हैं, अब सुनना है सरकारी में।
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? We can't hear you because BBIF is muted. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you could please put my slides up. Or if you can allow me to show my slides, I can do it from here. Welcome, everyone, back to session 3A, Global Solutions for Sample Sharing in Biobanking. I'm Deb Garcia. I'm going to be your moderator today. I am the ex-president of ISPR, or past president of ISPR. I also have been in the biobanking business for over 25 years, and I'm also now serving as an advisor to the biobanking operations and management teams. So today's session 3A will provide a global perspective on the importance of biobanking and sample sharing, highlighting challenges and possible solutions. There are 4 parts today that you'll be seeing. There'll be the keynote address, and then we'll have country-specific insights, a panel discussion, and then presentations from a couple of our corporate sponsors. So today I'm going to be talking about global integration of biobanks, sharing to succeed. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the importance of biobanks. There's new discoveries, new knowledge, new approaches, essential resources in medical research, support of many types of contemporary research, personalized medicine, genomics, proteomics, metabiomics, systems medicine, and bioinformatics. So right now, there's many biobanks, and what would be great is if they could be under one study, or if they're trying to do one study. So like biobank number 1 could be having the specimens or the information. Biobank 2 would have other specimens available, and then biobank 3 could have something else. So there are the rare subtypes that all of them might have or that they can share amongst themselves. There's also common diseases. And then there's many samples if they're not collected in a standardized way, especially with respect to controlling. Results can be noisy or not factual. So what we really need are standards, and these standards that we're going to be talking about, especially today from our multi speakers that will be following me, are going to be talking about how we can make those processes more efficient, making it easier to work together, improving our reproducibility, and then also to talk about quality management, making products, processes more consistent. It improves safety and then makes it fit for purpose. So we talk about best practices and standards and how they play a role in improving our biobanks. And there's many different organizations that have these best practices and standards. So many of you might have heard of ISPR, the International Society for Biological and Environmental Repositories. There's the CAP, the College of American Pathologists. There's also the Canadian Tumor Repository Network, IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, World Health Organization, and of course, many of us have heard of ISO, the International Organization for Standardization. So there's all these available tools that are ready for us. There's standards. There are the ISO 20387, and then there's also the 17025. All of these can be found online, as well as our best practices, ISPR's best practices, NCI's best practices for specimens, biospecimens resources, and then also the OECD best practices guidelines for biological resources. And then also too, there's targeted tools and resources. There's the ISPR self-assessment tool, the SAT. There's also an international audit tool. There's also the IBBL repository proficiency testing, and then also the ISPR biospecimen science working group, which we have, and then also the CEDARNet, the Canadian Tissue Repository Network, and then also CAP. So we have seen so many different challenges for our international biobanking. Working across borders requires quality standards and sharing of SOPs to allow comparability, ethical legal issues to working globally, and then sharing is important. Biohoarding must be avoided. And by biohoarding, I mean that we're collecting specimens, but they're not being used. So what we talk about then are specimens that are being banked and who manage specimen data, and other that have access to it are legally and ethically obligated to protect their data that are considered private information. To address this, countries' lawmakers are setting up their own regulations and laws to protect research participants. So really what we have is a lack of real harmonization of these LC across the borders. And this is something that we really have to look at and start to think about how we can start to standardize. And again, our speakers today will be talking about how they've standardized a lot of this in their own countries. And so we might ask, how is low utilization of current biobanks, what does it due to? Is it the lack of quality, not being available, the wrong type, wrong population, etc.? So we really need to start thinking about all of these things as we're starting to really try to think about how we can get the utilization of our samples. Also, too, there's these multi-site challenges where we have accreditation. Sites should be accredited by an international organization for standards, maybe like ISO, or even following good clinical laboratory practices. We have sample collection protocols that can be designed and tested to produce high quality samples. Data management, we always need a robust management system. And then also too, having that full audit trail. And then even our archiving facilities need to be robust and should have the appropriate sample conditions, storage conditions like freezers with with monitored alarms. And then also too, we talk about ethics approval. There should be a mechanism for timely ethics approval for specimen collection and leftover clinical specimens. Maybe even thinking about having a central biobank within each of your regions so that it overcomes the challenges associated with multi-site collection. And then having a dashboard that can help to visualize summary statistics such as recruitment, summaries, samples, and inventories. And we start to worry about data management and being in compliance with that as well. And again, there's compliance with data regulations that often involves implementing strong data security measures. Global laws and regulations must be followed as it gets more complicated when data is shared across different regions, different countries, with differing statutes. And then also to based on the purpose and specific stakeholders, a biobank may have to comply with standards and certifications for data gathering, storage, sharing, and disposal. And again, we're talking about ISO, ISPR, NCI, GDPR, FDA, and then there's HIPAA regulations as well. And then we should be following our principles. There's the FAIR principles, CARE, ALCOA Plus, data governance principles. And I'm not going to go through all of these. You'll have my slides that you can look at a later time. And then we also have the trust principles, which talk about transparency and responsibility. PRISM principles, which is about the planning and responsibility and integrity, and the OECD principles for human biobanks and genetic research databases, the governance, the privacy, confidentiality, scientific integrity, etc. And then if we're looking at our regulatory frameworks, there's in the EU, there's the GDPR, there's the HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, the Human Tissue Act in the UK, Personal Data Collection Bill, and that's in various regions. And then there's also the Convention on Human Rights and Biomedicine Council of Europe, and the Nagoya Protocol. So these are just a few things that I wanted to bring to your attention as we were talking about how are we going to be doing this sharing? What are the things that we need to do to have this global sharing of specimens and data? So that's my question to all of us. And so we have 10 speakers that we have today that are going to be with us. And so each of them will give a brief description of what's going on within their own countries. And so right now I'd like to invite our first speaker, and I believe it is Dr. Zisis Zolaktis. And so if you can come on, Zisis, and we can start.
is organizing its biobanking landscape. Because this is important in what sense? Organizing biobanking landscape. Because this is
Slide name. Slide इधर दूंगा ना मैं.
okay, is this now this is what
Sir, please continue.
yes? Okay, I think this is Zoom 2. I'll carry on. Yes, okay, I'll carry on. So we have the national association. So there are national groups. They vote for one institution to be the national node, and the national node is what participates in the EU research infrastructure. So when it comes to the EU research infrastructure, so these are pan-European infrastructures on different subjects. We have one for clinical trials, one for molecular and biobanking acronym. You have for translational science, you have for city living and city planning, for the quality of the waters, for chemicals and toxicity. So all these big infrastructures, they are not dealing, they're funded by the EU, but they will never deal with the individual group in the country. They will only deal with the national representation. And it's the role of that national representation to organize in different ways. Whenever we add an additional layer, there is a complexity. So why would we add this level of complexity? And the reason is simple because legally, all of these countries are not compatible with. So when it comes, for example, for data protection or data transfer, there isn't a complete alignment in the law. So the EU initiatives have to be translated and adapted to the local legal requirement. And that's why you need that between layer of the national law to allow for this adaptation to take place. This has worked quite well with GDPR. It took a long time to be voted, the General Data Protection Regulation. It took a long time to be voted in as law by the individual countries. But once we had this, formally as law, the individual nodes can actually see what the law says in relation to the local legislation and adapt the initiatives accordingly. Something similar is happening right now. In September, we had the AI Act passed by the EU. So now each national parliament has to pass the AI Act, and it has to align to the existing national legislation. So again, it will be a task for the national representative to see how these legislations will adapt in relation to AI implementation. Um, does it work? For the most part, yes. So for the most part, because we have this dual communication directly from the EU to the national legal system, but also feedback through the scientific community, there is uh, there is feedback received, and there are amendments happening, and there are derogations or explanations of how the law should be translated and implemented in practice. So we've seen this with GDPR, where people were asking, well, okay, we understand the general data protection regulation was implemented primarily to collect data for telecommunications, not so much for health. So there was a derogation, there were responses by the European Commission to clarify the spirit of the law so that the implementation is actually quite clear. So this is how we operate in Europe. The downside is the speed. It's a very slow system. So yes, it's inclusive. Eventually, it works, but it takes time. So if you have an emergency like the pandemic, perhaps it's not the most effective system to have in place. But if you have a mission on cancer, which is a big pan-EU mission, then it works quite well. So that's our experience. We will stick with the system at least for the next 5 to 10 years. Definitely for the next 5 years because of what's investment, but probably for 10 years from now. And we would expect, at the moment, we have 28 research infrastructures that are pan-EU. We expect it to reach probably 35 to 40 by the end of the next 10-year period, covering all aspects of that's it. I'll leave it here. I don't know who could hear me, but I don't know online who could hear me. But it's fine from my side. I'll leave it for you. But if there is any question, please let me know.
Thank you, Cisis.
For
Thank you, Cisis. And I think if there's any questions, we will address them during our panel discussion. And then, so now we bring on Marianne Henderson. And before Marianne starts, I have to apologize. I meant to say that in my talk earlier, many of the slides came from Marianne, and I want to thank her and acknowledge that she had put those together for me because we had talked about this earlier. So thank you very much, Marianne.
My pleasure. I'm not sure if I'm showing on. Okay, here I am. As you heard from Deb, there are many activities. Okay.
Play button.
Play button, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard from Deb, there are many activities that are ongoing in the U.S. that affect our global work across many different disease types. I happen to work in cancer epidemiology, so we are studying rare diseases across the world, especially when the diseases are in multiple regions. We need to make sure that we understand the molecular signatures across those regions to get a very good sense of what potentially might be causing the disease and what potentially might be the preventative or therapeutic measures for any diseases. We at home, we're responsible for data privacy and legislation within the US to make sure that we are protecting participants in our research studies. I should be unmuted. Let's see. My mic is unmuted. Can you hear me?
Marianne, we can hear you.
Okay. So we have to deal with our HIPAA privacies as well as many standards within the cancer community. The U.S. National Cancer Institute has a set of guidelines, and those are really for folks that are funded by the Cancer Institute. The majority of biobanks are associated with ISBR best practices and ISO standards, and the number of biobanks across the U.S. that are being accredited against the ISO standards is growing weekly. We also, because we're working globally in many instances, the conflict that Deb mentioned between the different privacy rules across the world are have been quite difficult in that we can't directly share samples and the direct data specifically with the European community because of these differences in our standards. To kind of make an end run around this issue, we often have to put our own summary data together, and then those can be joined together between the different global partners to be able to do a metadata study across the disease. But the direct comparison of sample to sample or data type to data type for an individual is blocked in many instances because of privacy regulations across the world. I thought this would be important to mention because it is definitely a change in the way that we can do business in terms of biobank research, and should be acknowledged and hopefully can be smoothed over time in a way that allows us to do better science and an easier way to do research on rare disease so that we can speed discovery for these affected populations. So that is my US perspective. And Deb, I'll cede to the next person that plans to speak.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for your comments about the US. And again, we will have a panel discussion later on. And so if anybody has any questions, you can ask Marianne at that time. I would now like to invite Dr. Hans Prakash from Malaysia to unmute himself, and then also to unmute his or to show his video.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen. Oh dear. While it's uploading, if you can hear me. So my name is Hans. I work at the Institute for Medical Research with the Ministry of Health, Malaysia. So I'm in charge of the Ministry of Health Biobank. Our biobank is predominantly involved in cancer research, but we also deal with other non-communicable diseases. It's still processing the upload, I think. Is it visible now?
Not yet.
I'm not sure. It says it's uploaded. Maybe I need to stop my camera, perhaps. Is that okay?
Yes, Hans, we can now see it.
Yeah, so I've kept my slides quite brief because we've got only 5 minutes. So Malaysia is a multi-ethnic country in Southeast Asia. We've got about 34 million people, and we've got more than 30 ethnic groups in the country. There we go. Regulatory framework-wise, I mean, I think the important thing is most of us are keen with sharing samples and data as long as the privacy and confidentiality of our participants, patients are protected. In Malaysia, we've got multiple acts that regulate this and multiple guidelines as well, from the Human Tissue Act to Biosafety Acts to Personal Data Protection Acts. And the latest one was the Access to Biological Resources and Benefit Act, which came about due to the Nagoya Protocol. We've got multiple guidelines, mostly for human specimens, but also for stem cell research and also plant-based resources. But sharing of samples, most of the regulatory component is in the Access to Biological Resources Act. So, I mean, I think Deb touched on this earlier. So, to share samples and even data, we need some sort of standards and some harmonization of what each biobank has. So, the majority or almost all of the biobanks in Malaysia follow best practices. We are currently, the Ministry of Health Biobank is currently looking at ISO 20387. However, we've decided to pause until the latest version comes out. In the meantime, we are in the midst of getting the CTRNet certification. Also, to standardize biobanking practices in Malaysia, we have a group of biobankers and policymakers as well as other stakeholders. And we are in the midst of making a national biorepository policy to ensure that at least all the biobanking activities within the country are standardized. Right. So sharing of biological material within the country or across borders, at the end of the day, it just has to go through the necessary regulatory requirements. So, ethics approvals, biodiversity committee approvals, access committee approvals, and everything has to be documented, and legally binding agreements must be executed before any transfer of samples or data, and only anonymized samples and data or de-identified samples and data will be shared. And the other thing is, of course, utilization of these samples must follow the relevant approved protocols as well as agreements. So data sovereignty and sample sovereignty has become very important of late, but it does not prohibit sample sharing. It's just everything has to go through the proper procedures and protocols. So that's about it from my side. So I would like to acknowledge our Director General of Health, Deputy Director General, and all my colleagues from the Ministry of Health. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. And again, we'll have questions for you probably during the panel discussion. So now I would like to invite from Dr. Han Vu from Vietnam. And so Han, if you could please turn on your video and then also to unmute. Thank you. I just heard from Dr. Vu that she was not able to, that she got kicked out of the studio, and she's not able to come back on. We're going to give her some time, and maybe we can bring her back on later on. So I'll go now to the next person, and that would be Dr. Wayne Ning from Australia.
Hi everyone. I'm gonna share my screen. Just give me a sec. I'm just trying to make sure I share the right screen. Let me know when you can see the screen.
We can now see your screen. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thanks. Hi everyone. I'm Wayne. I'm the General Manager for the Victorian Cancer Biobank in Australia, and also the Director at Large for the Indo-Pacific region, RIM regions for the ISBA. So thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I hope my slides will be brief enough so that we could meet the 5 minutes requirements. So I guess I'm going to start with a bit of introductions about the Australian landscapes for biobanking. So we have quite a strong and active biobanking ecosystems here in Australia. So I think recently I did a quick surveys around to find out that we have probably more than 200 biobanks of research specimens collections in the country, and they are sort of split across different regional jurisdictions here. And these are some of the registries or the locators that's available across different states in the country. So it's kind of, as you can see, they're quite fragmented. I think that's probably we're not alone, in many countries or regions are similar, but there are some resources here. So these are the types of different biobanks we have in Australia. So I guess all for different purposes or studies, or they are generic enough to support different kind of health and medical research. In terms of regulatory, so I guess we probably are still similar with many other countries. We don't actually have a specific biobank legislations or guidelines, although we generally being guided by a few guidelines and also the legislations. So the first one obviously is our ethical conduct guidelines, which kind of prescribes how biospecimen can be used, and that all the use of that should really go through a ethics committee for approval. So I think that's kind of similar across. Obviously, we also have to comply to the Australian privacy principle, which is the principles covers the whole country, but each of us, like where am I in Victoria's and each and other states will have different privacy acts. So it's quite jurisdictional based. Also is similar towards the Human Tissue Acts, which each of the states and or territory has their own the acts as well. I will talk a little bit about the challenges later. Obviously, sample sharing, I think there's multiple different ways, and generally, I think we sort of being
current
it's either the
situation
biobank that's open access or
to
open.
biobanking and data sharing. As a big nation, biobank in Indonesia is still growing in a sense of understanding, and there is
Something is going on.
UGM Biobank is situated
I'm
in the
sorry,
oldest state
Wayne.
university in Indonesia.
I think this is a
and we
recorded
have been key
from.
player for development of biobanking in Indonesia. With regards to the task given, here with some insight regarding biobanking network and data sharing. From regulatory framework, we have Biobank and Material Transfer Agreement, or MTA, sitting back to back in our latest health law. Particularly for MTA, it is stated that transfer of specimens and its informative content to outside Indonesia can be done when the examination
Shall I continue?
Wayne, please go right ahead. I'm not sure if we should just have Yaya's go and then Wayne, we bring you back on.
Sure. I think Yaya's presentation stopped, but the slide is still being shared, so I'm happy for either way.
Okay. If we can keep going with Yaya's presentation, please, and then we'll bring back Wayne.
Sure. Looks like it's back to my slide.
Wayne, you're back on.
I will just proceed. Hopefully, I didn't. Hopefully, everyone's remember what I said, but all good. Obviously any sample sharing or provisions or being used has to be approved by the Human Resource Ethics. In terms of sharing internationally, we don't really have any we do have the ethical guidelines to say how we can share things, but I think there is no hard and stern no for sharing samples internationally, although there was a clause to say that obviously this has to be approved by the ethics committee, as well as in the general terms, for whoever we're sharing would sort of comply to either the ethics guidelines that we have in Australia, or the ethical guidelines within those countries or regulations would be of quite similar to the Australian standard. So I think that's the kind of the catch. I think it's kind of similar to many different regions or country. Obviously, in general, there will be excess governance of those custodians of those samples. So depending on who you deal with, some are easier, some are harder. And in general terms, I mean, this is kind of similar to everyone else. Every samples will need to be having the material transfer agreements entered. So some of the key challenges for sample sharing, I kind of don't really mention is that going to be international or even I presume for Australian, because we have different jurisdictions across the country. So it's kind of quite similar in both internationally and even locally. I think the first one that has been quite recently being raised as a big issue by a lot of biobankers within the regions and the researchers within our countries is the inability to find biobanks or samples and the respective data that sort of will help. So it's kind of being very fragmented and not able to find them. So that's one of the key challenge we have here. So this happens in Australia, but I think it's kind of generically applicable to the whole region for sharing internationally. I think the jurisdictional privacy regulations obviously have quite a big impacts, because we always have to check what are the privacy sort of compliance we have to have with each other. And then when we're sharing internationally, obviously there will be stronger compliance that we need to work on. Inconsistent ethical governance. I think this is similar to what Deb has mentioned just now, is the ethics governance and the consents tend to be up for interpretations and inconsistent. So I think there is a need to sort of make it more harmonized so that the samples are more interoperable. So, which is kind of also I think one of the big challenges, as we always see, is the excess governance. So the sharing or the sharing policies can be quite varied across different collections or biobanks institutions. Lack of quality governance, I guess I'm more referring to, I think many biobanks have good quality. It's just that how they operate and the quality systems are not consistent. So making the interoperability a challenge for sharing samples as well. Similar to what again has been mentioned is how do we have harmonized metadata for sample sharing or data sharing? I think data sharing is kind of upcoming, and well, it's really the case for a lot of, with the limitations of samples, how can we actually make the data available, or the data being generated could be shared for secondary usage. So I think this is another areas that we're facing. Some collaborations has happened with sample sharing. Many of them occurs at the research collaboration. Sometimes there's a consortiums form as international to share sample. So my own biobank, as an example, has a collaboration, just initiated a collaborations with Singapore Translational Cancer Consortium last year to sort of make our specimen being available on a catalog together. So really trying to foster collaborations between both Australia and Singapore to have using samples as strong tools to foster collaborations for cancer research in both countries, so to really enhance the research, quicker research outcome. With that, I would like to thank or acknowledge the people who have contributed to some of these slides as well. Thank you. And then finally, as being the ISPA DAO, allow me to have a few seconds to mention about our upcoming conference. So feel free to reach out to us or sign up to the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you for bringing up the ISPR meeting that's coming up in Montreal in May. So if you're ready to come join us in Canada, we would love to see everybody here. Join us there. So again, our next, thank you, Wayne, and we'll start again with Yaya's presentation. That is a video, I believe, and that is controlled by, I believe, over in India.
With regards to the task given, here with some insight regarding biobanking network and data sharing. From regulatory framework, we have Biobank and Material Transfer Agreement, or MTA, sitting back to back in our latest health law. Particularly for MTA, it is stated that transfer of specimens and its informative content to outside Indonesia can be done when the examination cannot be carried out in Indonesia, or it can be done in Indonesia but to achieve the main objective of the research, or for the purpose of quality control. MTA National Committee has been reactivated since 2024, and hopefully it will fasten the process for international collaboration. In addition to that, we have law on protection for personal data, on which it protects ranging from the right of the data owner, the personnel who has the data, how data can be handled in a safe way, and share in a safe way while upholding privacy. For biobank infrastructure for long-term storage is present nationwide, while still system of biobanking should be built and standard should be in place. For international data sharing, it is required for a memorandum of understanding that covers collaboration among parties, while for specific activities, research agreement and ethical permission from local or international body should be present, and further, MTA should be agreed by our national body. As to facilitate data sharing, most biobank uses website or dashboard to enable window shopping for different parties to check on their collection. For example, I put UGM Biobank website on which it has putting aggregate data. Also an example from Ministry of Health BJSI for their dashboard for collection information. Trust, capacity building, and LC issues are challenges that needs to be answered, and we try to tackle it through National Biobank Network since 2015 through our workshops, discussions, meeting, and our social media, as well as becoming part of biobank networking through organizations such as ISBER or BCNet. In order to answer those challenges, good governance from local institutions as well as national government are required. Looking through the experience during pandemic, on which global efforts was built for collaboration, this should open and give tool to answer questions on how people can collaborate mutually benefit and how we can get the best of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yaya, for your presentation. Let's go to our next speaker, who is Dr. Mahendra Bhatt, and she is from Nepal. Dr. Bhatt, if you could please unmute yourself and also to put on your video.
Processing, preserving, and distribution of corneas to the surgeon for the transplantation. So this is the one of the good practice we are doing. This is the picture. We can see one of the pioneer for some surgeon, Somduk Roy. Most people know in South in Asia area. Very pioneer in the cataract surgery. So exactly, main objective of this eye bank is obtaining tissue from the donor run smooth. SCRP hospital corneal retrieval program, a donor hospital, and main crematoriums. They collect the sample, processing and preserving cornea, including pre-cut tissues, distribution of corneas to the surgeon. Mainly, previously we recruit cornea from the foreign countries for the transplantation. Nowadays, we are having facility to export the corneas from the Nepal as well. Anyway, other example, we have very good example of the skin banking. We have one of the established Kirtipur Bond Hospital, Nepal's first time only skin bank established for their however, still it cannot, it is not created with the file and utility we are talking about networking of file. So it is established in 2014 to treat the bone test. They can collect issues from the donors and they can some of the other hospital facilities were doing other hospital facilities were doing cancer, for cancer by repository, specimen culture, they are having limitation to sell samples inside the outside limitation to disease center tuberculosis they are they are having facility to store the infectious pathogens, storage for the research, regular epidemiological studies, and limited specimen as well as so ethical issue is the one of the challenge country want to establish a very good standard biobank facility like say, sample through all over the world. So governance policies, it is under the health ministry, health, health council, ethical review board member. We are trying to make specific guidelines to get out the biobank near countries as well as we are trying after making the guidelines and acts. Yeah, so till then we are just compromising with the facilities from the Nepal. So governance in the governance Ministry of Health and Population, Government of Nepal guideline facility. Yeah, however, there are many guidelines that established. However, they are just like for the different purpose. For therapeutic purpose, we can share the sample. For the research purpose, we can share data as well as samples. There are some rule and regulation guidelines. However, we need now exactly to make a biobank guideline, which is about guideline. So, to sample storage, sample sharing guideline, data storage, data sharing guideline should be clear. So guideline should be developed after getting experience from the farmers.
और ये मालूम कौन करता है?
कहीं भी इस पर्सन को हम ये उठाया ऑनलाइन होगा तो
we see streamlining multi-sectorial as well as multidisciplinary approach. Beyond the boundaries, we can go. Robust future
Thank you, Dr. Bhatt. We would like to now call our next speaker, and that would be Dr. Hetiriachi from Sri Lanka. If you could please unmute, or if you're in person, or if you can please
Hi.
join.
Thank you
If you
so
could
much
please
for the.
unmute, or if you're in person, or if you can please
Hi.
join.
Thank you
If you
so
could
much
please
for the.
unmute, or if you're in person, or if you can please
Hi.
join.
Thank you so much for the. Hi. I think there is a bit of an echo. Hi. I think there is a bit of an echo. Can you see my slides?
No, we cannot see your slides. Here we go. Now we see them.
Okay.
No, we cannot see your slides. Here we go. Now we see them.
Thank you for the invitation to present on the global solutions.
Now we see them.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo. Is that only for me? Global solutions. Yeah, there's a bit of an echo. Is that only for me? Global solutions. Yeah, there's a bit of an echo. Is that only for me? Is that a bit of an echo? Is that only for me? Is that a bit of an echo? Is that only for me? Is that a bit of an echo? Is that only for me? Sorry, there seems to be a bit of a technical issue. Sorry, there seems to be a bit of a technical issue. Sorry, there seems to be a bit of a technical issue. Sorry, there seems to be a bit of a technical issue. Sorry, there seems to be a bit of a technical issue. Sorry, there seems to be a bit of a technical issue. Sorry, then shall I rejoin a bit later once the technical issue is sorted, or sorry, then shall I rejoin a bit later once the technical issue is sorted, or sorry, then shall I rejoin a bit later once the technical issue is sorted, or
I'm not sure if it's you.
No.
I'm not sure if it's you. There, I think the problem has been solved. Thank you for your patience. Please go ahead.
From Sri Lanka, and I'm a clinician by profession, and I mainly deal with rare genetic conditions. Sri Lanka, and I'm a clinician by profession, and I mainly deal with rare genetic conditions. So Sri Lanka is also known as the Pearl of the Indian Ocean, and if you know, it's just below India. So Sri Lanka is also known as the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. Yes, I'm sorry. It's just below India. So Sri Lanka is also known as the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. Yes, I'm sorry. It's just below India. So Sri Lanka is also known as the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. It's okay. Shall we move on to the next speaker, and I will try to fix it if it's a. It's okay. Shall we move on to the next speaker, and I will try to.
Can you try muting and see what happens?
It's okay. Shall we move on to the next speaker, and I will try to.
Can you try muting and see what happens? Can you try muting? Can everyone hear me clearly now? There doesn't seem to be an echo. So I'm going to move to, let's try unmuting again. And then let's see if it works better. Let's try unmuting again. And then let's see if it works better. Let's try unmuting again. And then let's see if it works better. Let's try. So could you try signing back in, Dr. Hirayachi, and see if we can get it better? And then I think I'll move on to the next speaker and then bring you back on, if that's okay with you. So for our next speaker, Dr. Jan, I think that you're online. And so Dr. Jan is from India. And if we can have you please unmute and pull up your slides and see how we can do.
I don't know if you can hear me because I'm not in the studio.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right, let me try to present.
We can also see you.
Wonderful. Can you see my slides?
Not yet. They're about to load. Here we go.
Okay. Is it full screen mode?
No, it's still on. There you go.
Okay. So in the interest of time, I'll move on quickly. So there are multiple government departments in India, and most of them recognize the value of biobanks. I'm mentioning some of the Indian departments. Indian Council of Medical Research is the apex body that sets the guidelines for biobanking from the medical community. Then there is a Department of Biotechnology that falls under Ministry of Science and Technology that sets the guidelines for many of the biotechnology departments and organizations. There is a Department of Science and Technology, traditionally more for physical sciences. And then there are several other Indian government science departments that acknowledge biobanks as national assets. These guidelines emphasize good governance and sustainability of biobanks. They anticipate sharing of samples and data explicitly nationally and internationally to maximize their utility. Sharing of samples and data is allowed for commercial purposes also under a material transfer agreement and IRB or IEC approval. And it's understood that use of samples and data is essential for validating new products such as diagnostics, drugs, technology, and treatments. And having been here for such a long time, and most of us know that India benefits significantly from global research, as most novel drugs, diagnostics, technologies, equipment used in Indian labs and hospitals are developed abroad. And a case in point is that very recently in the Indian financial budget, 36 drugs were exempted from import duty considering their life-saving critical importance. However, the guidelines and challenges are many. So there are differences in guidelines across departments in India. What existed before changed in March 2024 when the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, which falls under the Ministry of Commerce, mandated obtaining an additional no objection certificate or NOC for biofluid sample exports. Now, this Ministry of Commerce further specified that academic organizations need to take this NOC from a Health Ministry Screening Committee, also called HMSC, whereas commercial organizations need this NOC from ICMR. There are several other government departments, as I mentioned. There is Department of Atomic Energy, DBT, DST, CSIR. They all have different guidelines with respect to sharing of samples and under what framework they should be used. There is not sufficient time to mention each of their guidelines, but enough to say that these other government departments encourage international collaborations. They share samples internationally, and they also specifically mention that fee for service work is also allowed by biobanks and other departments for sustainability purposes. So the biggest challenge is the inconsistent guidelines and their inconsistent implementation, which creates confusion and uncertainty and is hindering progress. The opportunity is tremendous. This audience knows very well that Asian data comprises less than 5% of the global genomics databases, as Western research has traditionally focused on Caucasian data. Hence, in the diversity, equity, and inclusion principles, Asian and African data is very much needed. Participation of short will really ensure better understanding of Indian genomics and enhance drug and diagnostic validation, which will be relevant for our Indian patients, and improve the delivery of personalized medicine, especially in cancer, which is growing very rapidly in India. So there are many emerging technologies in genomics, proteomics, and many of these which improve the prognosis of patients and for targeting therapies. And this is something we need to emphasize to our colleagues in government. This is just a snapshot of data in cancer specifically from our own biobank, showing that more than 50% of breast cancers, thyroid cancers, and non-small cell lung cancers have targetable mutations for which drugs are already approved. But then there are other cancers such as CRC, colorectal cancer, brain cancer, small cell lung cancer, where hardly 10% or less have any personalized medicine option. So we need to bring these up much higher. And we can only do that by participating in understanding the genomics. So in terms of suggested way forward, these are some ideas. We should harmonize guidelines across the departments and ministries. There are multiple ministries involved to streamline approvals and to promote international collaborations. In these discussions, industry representatives and stakeholders should also be included apart from academia and government because it's a very well-known industry that helps pharma and diagnostic companies. The dual benefit is there for sharing samples to advance science and develop healthcare solutions that are relevant for our patients. As before, there should be sharing of samples between organizations under MTAs, of course with ethical and regulatory oversight, to facilitate global partnerships. A suggestion is that the sending parties could share maybe once a year the kinds of samples, the number of samples that have been shared, so that the government is aware of what type of samples are going abroad and whether such analysis can be done in India with availability of better infrastructure. Most importantly, we should continue to prioritize access to innovative diagnostics and therapeutics for patients by enabling research that contributes to global medical advancements. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sean. So we will now call our next speaker, and our next speaker is from Japan. Dr. Hattori, are you on?
Yes, can you hear my voice?
We can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll share my slide. Can you see my slide? Not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Is it now? No. I think it's better to stop my video. Can you see? Not yet?
Not yet. Wait, I think it's coming.
Oh, no.
There we go.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kotaro Hattori from the National Center of Neurology and Psychiatry in Japan. Let me present an overview of biobanks in Japan. We have about 50 biobanks, including Tohoku Megabank, which is Northeast Japan Region Biobank, and Biobank Japan, which is basically genomic bank for common diseases, and National Center Biobank Network, which is a joint project of specialized national disease center, which cover almost all diseases. And currently, 4 banks in Japan have ISO 20387 accreditation. Here's a typical way for sample sharing. For National Center Biobank Network, the inventory can be searched through the catalog database. The process from inquiry to provision may take some time since we need ethical review for each application. We also have an expanding cross-search system connecting 14 biobanks across Japan. But for now, this is basically domestic. And the rules governing biobank, including ethical guidelines, which recently incorporated elements of the Personnel or Information Protection Act. And the funding for operation is supported by these ministries and our main funding agency and the pharmaceutical companies, except for the joint research funds and the distribution fee for each usages. As an application of new technologies, there are some trials such as extracting data from a hospital record system or using chatbot for user inquiry. And now many users and bank personnel are using generative AI for handling documents. And this is also very useful for quality management jobs such as risk assessment. And for hardwares, some banks using automated system. And since we have a lot of natural disasters, we are proactively using measures such as earthquake resistance. And there are several challenges for biobanking in Japan. The biggest one, I think, is that we need ethical approval for each usage. And to address this, we are trying to improve the ethical guideline. And of course, for coordination, this is a big burden, to address this, we are advancing human resource development at each biobank and society, plus building system to support utilization. And I think ISO 20387 has played a great role in facilitating this effort. And unfortunately, language barrier is also a challenge for especially international use. Even though English is accepted and in Biobank, ethical committees only accept documents in Japanese. And I believe above measures also help addressing this issue. Finally, for the international sharing, our biobank experience not much, but some experience cases. Although it is still big burden, it has become easier than before. And it is interesting for me that a researcher from the USA came all the way to get sample to Japan, and he says that Japanese samples are very good for metabolomic research. And when I asked, "Oh, is it because genetic variation is low?" He responded that, "Oh, that's a part of it, but more importantly, it's a small variation in lifestyle." In Japan, people tend to eat similar kind of food and have easy access to healthcare system. So there is a less metabolic variation, making it easier to explore biomarkers. And if there is a researcher in India that wish to make a collaborated research, there seems to be a funding available to support such research. That's conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Hattori, for your talk today. And we will now move on and to our next speaker. And Dr. Dr. Dina Shani, are you able to come back on again?
Hi, yes, I think the echo situation is sorted. So I'll just continue from where I stopped. Can you see my slides?
Not yet. I think they're still loading.
Okay. So I'm from Sri Lanka, and I'm a clinician by training, and I see patients with rare genetic conditions. And at the moment, at the Colombo Medical Faculty, we have a biobank of patients with cancer genetics and those who come for rare diseases as well. Just to tell you, Sri Lanka is just below the Indian Ocean. As you know, it's just a neighboring country of India. Can't seem to get this. Okay. Right. I can do without the slides if it's not moving. Right. So in our country, we have several biobanking facilities. One is the National Blood Transfusion Service, then the Medical Research Institute, and each faculty usually that carries out research, especially the medical faculties, we have academic biobanks. And also there are a few university-affiliated biobanks as well, and biobanks of the private and state sector hospitals as well we get. That in terms of different types of biobanks, we have disease-oriented biobanks, especially for cancer, rare genetic conditions, and rare disorders, and also the tissue-specific biobanks like the National Blood Transfusion Service, Sri Lanka Eye Donation Society has a biobank, and the Stem Cell Biobank. Private hospitals also carry their own biobanks, and also agricultural facilities as well. So in terms of regulatory frameworks, we don't have national guidelines or a framework that is governing these biobank activities. So institutes usually proactively adapt international guidelines, and usually they ensure that ethical and quality standards are maintained in these biobanks. So sample sharing can be done at institutional levels as well as internationally. If it's locally, we usually sign an MOU, but if it's internationally, we recommend that we sign a material transfer agreement. So there are a few challenges in terms of regulatory and ethical challenges we have in the country, as well as technical and infrastructure challenges. As you know, Sri Lanka is a small country, so we don't need so many biobanks. If we have few core facilities, that would suffice. And again, financial and sustainability issues. So one aspect is to overcoming and how to overcome this, and the way forward, in my opinion, is to develop a national biobank policy to regulate sample connection, storage, sharing, and also for collaboration. And also have an established central biobank network. So this is important because if we have a core facility, then we can sort of network with institutes that are doing research, plus institutes that use it for service-based biobanks, to collaborate and sort of network and go forward. I would also like to suggest increasing funding and infrastructure in terms of long-term sustainability. We also need trained professionals and bioimpact management awareness programs to conduct, especially to obtain skilled staff. And again, to be part of consortia and international collaboration, and also ethical governance. So that is my brief talk, and I would like to thank every one of you here, and we could collaborate and take things forward. This is my University of Colombo, Faculty of Medicine. At the moment, we have a genetic biobank in our department where we store blood for rare genetic conditions and also cancer genetics. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinashani, for your talk. That was very interesting. So we would like to thank the audience for joining us today to hear from different point of views from different countries about the challenges and these possible solutions for sharing of samples and data. And also, too, we thank our presenters for joining us. We know that there was a slight delay in starting this presentation, and so we will have to forego the panel discussion that we had planned for another time. And so, again, thank you, everybody, for all of your contributions and for joining us today. Thank you.